Hey, this is Grady from Anxious, and you're listening to The New Scene.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The New Scene. I am your host, Keith, and we are back with a very special bonus episode. And folks, I am not here alone. I have with me first-time guest and first-time guest co-host, Seth Hyman from Negative Progression Records. Seth, say hello.
Hi, Keith. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, Seth, it is wonderful to have you here. We're back again this week for a special bonus episode to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Chamberlain's Fate's Got a Driver. 25 years. Where does the time go? I don't know. But I have spoken to Adam Rubenstein of Chamberlain, and we cover it all. We cover the history of the band, Split Lip, into Chamberlain. We, of course, talk about Fate's Got a Driver. We talk about their latest 2020 record, Red Weather. We cover it all. You're going to love it. And that's coming up shortly. How about that, Seth?
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about it. It was a great interview, and it really got me thinking about the scene in the mid-90s, Midwest, second wave emo. Really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, Chamberlain, I think, are innovators in introducing heartland rock elements into the scene. I think they were one of the first, and it seems like the rest of the world is catching up, and that's coming up shortly. But first, let me get some business out of the way. We need your support. The New Scene needs your support. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at New Scene Pod. I'm trying to get us over 3,700 followers on Instagram. We've been teetering on the brink, past 3,700, falling back down. Let's get us over 3,700. So follow us on Instagram if you're not doing that. Follow our YouTube channels. We have a main channel with full episodes, and we have a clips channel with highlights from our favorite episodes. Like, subscribe, comment, all of that helps out a lot. We've got a shirt for sale. The New Scene Life is Music is Life shirt. It's available in the Death Wish Inc. store. Head on over to Death Wish Inc., search The New Scene, the shirt pops right up. Your purchase of that shirt helps directly fund this show, and we appreciate every single one of you who has purchased a shirt and reviews. We are getting ever closer to 100 reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We're at 79 on Apple and 78 on Spotify. If you haven't rated us yet, open up the app, hit that 5-star button, and leave a nice review. If you leave a nice review on Apple Podcasts, I'll read it on the air. Thank you so much to everybody who has submitted a review. And don't forget to support Iodine Recordings. Folks, One Line Drawing is out on the Tender Wild Summer Tour right now. Check jonahmatranga.com for tour dates. Make sure you go out and catch One Line Drawing. And The Darling Fire has a new single out called Clean Hands. You want to hear it? I can't wait for this record. I can't wait for you to hear this record. It's unbelievable. Go check it out. Now, make sure you check back in with us in segment 3, because we're going to talk more about the discussion with Adam, and we're going to talk to Seth to hear about Negative Progression Records and what's coming up with the label. Right, Seth?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. The label is just restarted, actually, after an 8-year hiatus.
Yeah, so we're going to hear all about that and talk about how we're doing. But folks, right now, we are going to speak to Adam Rubenstein of Chamberlain. Enjoy. All right, folks, we're here now with Adam Rubenstein. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Lovely to talk to you.
Absolutely, Adam. It's wonderful to have you here. You know, you have such a rich musical history between Split Lip and Chamberlain, and we're here celebrating the 25th anniversary of Fate's Got a Driver, and we're going to get to all that. But first, Adam, let me ask you, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Kiddo got out of school. She finished kindergarten, and summer fun is starting. I'm in full dad rock mode.
Do you just have the one kid?
Yeah. Just the one kid.
Yeah. One's enough. That'll keep you really busy, you know?
Yes, that is an understatement. Absolutely.
Where are you living these days?
I live in New York, in Harlem to be exact, just north of Central Park.
Oh, get out of town. I'm in Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
Oh, you are? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Why haven't we hung out? This is absurd.
I mean, if only we had known.
Yeah, I'm in Williamsburg quite often, so yeah, I'll give you a shout.
Absolutely. That would be awesome. Yeah. So let's get to know you a bit, Adam. Where did you grow up?
I mean, I consider myself from Indiana. I moved to Indiana in 1989, but I was actually born in Chicago, moved to San Diego, moved to Brussels, Belgium, and then like I said, in 1989, moved to Indiana, and I met Curtis from the band like one of my first days at school because I was wearing a Santa Cruz like slime balls shirt, and in suburban sort of upper class Indianapolis, northern Indianapolis where we lived, it was unusual and sort of counterculture to skateboard. So like us skaters kind of hung out together.
Yeah, skating used to be a really fringe thing. I only knew a few people who did it or talked about it or whatever. And by the time my younger sister went to middle school in the early to mid 2000s, like that was just what everybody did. That was like who you wanted to hang out with. I was like, boy, things have changed.
Absolutely. And with music too, it was like, there's a good chance that if somebody skated that they were also like fans of punk rock or hardcore or something in that sort of ecosphere.
Exactly. Wait, so you said you moved from San Diego to Belgium to Indiana. What did your parents do?
My dad was a scientist and he worked, but then he kind of transitioned into like the pharmaceutical and biotech side of things. So I don't know. He got wanderlust, I guess, and got moved around.
So you settle in Indiana. You meet your future bandmate at school. Talk about that. Talk about your experiences with music, the initial music that grabbed you, discovering the local scene around there, all of that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, my first love was like metal. Growing up in Belgium, I had this friend, this dude Carlo, who played guitar and kind of like showed me the ropes. Like he was a couple years older than I was, but we got into anything that had like, we would go to the local record store and find anything that was cool that had like Eddie from Iron Maiden, or I once bought a record by a band called Satan just because it was called Satan and it had a cool caricature on it. But it was actually a good record, and we just sat in my house and learned as many like metal riffs as we possibly could, and I was kind of crushed to leave him and then moved to Indiana. But once I moved to Indiana, like I said, I met Curtis first, and then we skated together. But then we weren't initially in a band together. He knew that I played, I knew that he played, but I kind of wanted to do my own thing. And I met this other dude Cole and this other dude Simon. And we formed. I wasn't really good enough to play like real thrash metal, so we ended up sort of sounding more like Green Day or something. Like we were a punk band, like we were heavy, but it was much more melodic than the stuff that I was into. So yeah, I had this band called Decrepit, and then Split Lip and Decrepit used to play shows together at like, we played the first show we ever played together was at the Carmel, Indiana Lions Club. It was like a homeless benefit. So
you're playing in Decrepit, but you're playing shows with Split Lip. How do you transition from the metal world to what Split Lip was doing?
Curtis just had asked me to join the band because I was kind of, getting a little, I was fronting the band. I was singing, and like, it didn't feel natural to me. And I think Curtis asked me to come and jam with them and thought they could maybe use another guitar player. And, Charlie was in the band, and Clay and Curtis. We had a different singer named Steve. We all went over to Clay's house and played together, and it was really nice to not be carrying all of the guitar and all of the vocals myself. And I think it suited my personality a lot better to just be a member of a collective like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And talk about the early days then. I mean, you're in Split Lip now. You're playing, like, what kind of music are you into? What are the shows like? I'm curious about those days, because they're certainly a lot different from right now.
Yeah, I mean, what was cool was, like I said, I was like into metal, and it wasn't that much of a bridge to get into like punk rock. But in Indianapolis, there was, amongst like in high school, there was a little really cool little underground scene, and there was some basement shows in clothing stores, like I said, shows in VFW hall, rented out rooms. If I could name drop some bands, there's like a great band called Outspoken. They were kind of like proggy and a little punk. There was a band called Jot. Steve Kowalski's Army was really awesome. There's all these little niche bands that I'm telling you are really, really good bands. And, then I thought those bands were like sort of my elders, but they were probably, 2 years older at the time. But I was in ninth grade when I first started playing music with Split Lip. So, someone who's in 11th grade felt like a pseudo adult.
It really does. Like I started going to shows in 10th or 11th grade, and I would go see these bands, and they were like adults to me. But now I talk to a lot of them on the podcast, and I've realized they're either the same age as me or just a couple years older.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, bands used to come into town that were, like a few years older than us. To transition a little bit, one of the first shows we played once David was in the band was in Louisville, Kentucky, and we met Endpoint. And they were, not much older than us, but they felt like, and when they came to town, it felt like our big brothers were in town, that like they were absolutely adults. But we were all kids. Like all of us were kids.
Exactly. Some people are just further along in the process. Like if a band that you respect comes along and has a record that you really love, they're like otherworldly almost to a degree.
Absolutely. Like I would get starstruck by like, just bands that played on 7-inches on like no-name labels. I would know their songs and they would come to town, and it definitely felt, as if like seasoned, adults in the punk rock world were coming to play. And I was definitely a little awestruck sometimes, just like hearing songs that I heard on a record played live in front of my face.
So Split Lip is playing, Endpoint is around. Who are the bands that are around at this time? Like who are people looking up to and aspiring to be?
Well, man, you're testing my my memory. The Charlie from the band is the guy who tends to remember everything, not me. But there was this there was Dayton and there was Louisville and Indy, Chicago. There was bands. Like we played a show with like one of Tony Victory's first bands called like Even Score. I think we were on that show, or maybe I was just there. But we also had friends in Dayton. There was a band called Stronghold that we played with a lot. We had friends, other parts of Ohio. That was our first introduction to Dirk and Doghouse Records was through his bands Transcend and Majority of One. And then of course there was, Louisville, there was Endpoint, there was Metro Shifter. There was quite a little scene we had going in the Midwest then. And it all kind of culminated to in Dayton. They had the More Than Music Festival that we played a couple years, and people from sort of all over the Eastern U.S. specifically, DC, Virginia, a lot of really cool bands. Some Revelation bands would come and play. Yeah, I could talk about those festivals ad nauseum, but there was definitely quite a groundswell and a movement then in the kind of punk and hardcore scene.
Talk about the festival a little bit. It sounds like there would be a lot of different types of bands there.
There would be. One of the things that always kind of frustrates Split Lip is we would always sort of be on these shows with, the Integrities or Dead Guys or Snap. We'd always be on these bills with like these really heavy bands, and we were called Split Lip. So people just thought that we fit in. But the cool thing then is like, More Than Music, like I should probably look up a flyer so I can recall everything. But there was like interesting sort of like art bands like, Hoover, Lungfish. And then there was certainly like, heavier bands, Worlds Collide. But then you'd have like Into Another or, who were just like, melodic metal. Or then you'd have, I'm trying to remember if all these bands actually played More Than Music. But then we'd have our friends, Ashes from DC, Brian McTiernan's band.
Yes.
They had a female singer, Elena, who we collaborated with down the line a little bit. There were melodic bands too that were just playing great. That had some songcraft too, that weren't just chest beating hardcore bands. But all of it fit together, and I think at the time there was just like a thirst for it. Like we were all in high school, and grunge was coming along, so you would turn MTV, and there was Eddie Vedder, jumping off of PA speakers into like a crowd of like moshing human beings, and I think that sort of movement of like grunge sort of collided with our punk hardcore world and made those shows like really popular amongst like high school kids.
Yeah, I think there was just a thirst for guitar-driven music. There was so much interesting stuff happening at the time. Like, when I think about some of those bands that were actually on MTV, I'm like, wow, that's pretty incredible. There was like actual, real good music happening everywhere.
Absolutely. I mean, going back to that scene, like the biggest bands, like in the, when the Seattle movement happened, I remember seeing, Smells Like Teen Spirit on, there's a show called Video Jukebox. You had to kind of stay up late and you could call in and then you would request a video. It was on sort of like a public access channel. And I remember I saw Smells Like Teen Spirit on that first. I remember my first thought was like, oh shit, they're on to us. Like our scene, like our little scene has now been hijacked. It's been hijacked by the mainstream and it'll never be the same. And, but it was true. But I mean, Nirvana was a good band. I mean, you look at a band like Soundgarden, this unicorn, like amazing vocalist and Chris Cornell, and writing these, Jesus Christ Posed or Spoon Man or all these like bizarro world songs that transcended into the mainstream and people loved it. It was art, it was art rock. You don't, in our kind of pop universe now, it's hard to imagine, a band like Faith No More, like shooting to the top of the charts. Like it doesn't seem possible.
Right. That's interesting that you saw Smells Like Teen Spirit and thought, oh no, like they're on to our thing. Because, most of the people that I talk to, it's like, oh, I got inspired by Nirvana, or, they were inspired by them later. So it's funny to hear that from the other side.
Yeah, I mean, I'm dating myself, but absolutely, we were like, they sounded counterculture to me, and what we were doing at the time in our sort of skate punk scene was counterculture, and it was, kids expressing themselves physically, moshing and dressing kind of the way that they did in that video, baggy clothes and not well laundered clothing, for lack of a better description. And
exactly,
it felt that way. It felt like, oh man, like punk rock's coming in the mainstream. Here it is.
It's crazy to think about a band as big as Nirvana being outspoken about all the positive things they were outspoken about, like women's rights and anti-homophobia and all that stuff, because all that stuff was rampant at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were pretty like politically active too. I talk about Endpoint. Endpoint was super politically active. We always, we're high school kids, so we're a little bit melodramatic about everything. But we always, I don't remember all the statements we were trying to make, but we definitely strive to sort of be viewed as a force for change and for looking at things differently and for being accepting of everyone, especially in a very conservative Midwest.
Absolutely. So talk about Split Lip and the growth of the band, leading into you switching over to Chamberlain.
Well, I should say I was talking about, we first had Steve, who's in the band, and that was pretty short-lived. David was kind of part of the hardcore scene, and he came over and rehearsed with us, and we preferred David's voice to Steve's, so Steve was let go. We're split up for a long time, and the sort of template for Split Lip was, like I said, I grew up a metalhead. Charlie kind of grew up a metalhead. We would write these sort of metal inspired riffs, but we also loved melody. David grew up with Bob Dylan and then 7 Seconds, and we loved Dag Nasty and all these sort of more melodic bands. So we're always kind of towing this line between like being a tough punk sort of hardcore band and wanting to write songs and sing songs and do things that were much more melodious. So when I listen to like Split Lips for the Love of the Wounded, there's moments that it almost sounds like an Anthrax record or something. Like it doesn't sound like a Chamberlain record at all. And then I think, once we had decided to change the name, but yeah, once we there was a conscious effort to sort of just like, we were listening to stuff that was more traditional in terms of like song structures. The songs on Faith's Got a Driver that are certainly 5 Year Diary, for example, it's sort of like a power ballad, and then there's an acoustic song at the end. And I mean, that's the transition just started to happen naturally. And we all, I was saying there's all this exciting music in the world then in mainstream radio everywhere. Like everything was good. I just feel like, I think everyone thinks that about their, late teens and early 20s. That seems like the golden age of music, but I really do. I mean, we're on the same page on this. Like, I really do believe it was. And then you had, Radiohead and Oasis and all these other bands sort of coming to the forefront that wrote great songs. And I think that infected us to a degree. And we got a little bit out of the chugga chugga and more into the strummy strummy. And we originally had released Fate's Got a Driver as a split lip record, and the name just didn't fit with the sort of ethos and the new sound that we had sort of created for ourselves. We just felt like more of a rock band, we still like love the punk scene, and a lot of the songs are pretty, punk or emo leaning, but we just thought that if we changed the name to Chamberlain, it would add a sort of sense of refinement, I guess, to what we were trying to do.
Absolutely. Did the name Split Lip cause confusion throughout the time for the band then? Because it does sound like a tough name.
Yeah. And like I said, we were playing with all these tough guy bands.
Yeah.
And I remember, in that era, we would start to get, letters and calls. We played in New York, and there'd always be an A&R guy there. And I asked an A&R guy who became a good friend of ours, I remember specifically walking through Soho with him and saying like, is this hurting us? This name Split Lip? I feel like it's hurting us because everyone just assumes that, we're a New York hardcore band or something. And he didn't give me a straight answer, but I'm glad that we changed the name, even though it was like an audacious thing to do. It was ridiculous. Like we put out a record that sounded the way it did and had a certain degree of success because we were already had a name for ourselves with Split Lip, and then God bless Doghouse, but they just agreed to put out the same exact record with remixed differently with new vocals and call it Chamberlain. Just put it out again. Like I've never heard of this story in rock history. I think we may have been the only band to ever take that approach. I don't know.
I think you and Elliot are the only bands to ever do that.
Oh, Elliot did it as well.
Well, it's a little different. Elliot did False Cathedrals. They released that, and then 2 people left the band, and they got new people. So they re-recorded it, but the songs changed, and then they eventually released that.
Oh. But it's still called Elliot.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's kind of the same, but kind of different, too.
Right. If Elliot had changed their name to Jeffrey, then it would be the same thing.
Yeah. So that is a pretty bold move. I mean, it sounds like people's tastes changed as they do as we're growing up. I mean, my musical taste has evolved greatly over the years. It sounds like we were into different things, and you just wanted a name change and the record to sound more like what you were presently into. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Split Lip just seemed like it was just our way to kind of demark the end of early adolescence and move into sort of like the college years. And we just, and there's this whole indie rock thing happening too, right? And we wanted to be part of that too. We wanted to be able to, play shows with, Superchunk or Archers of Loaf or Pavement. Like we wanted to like be that too. Because we were just curious about everything. Like we love that scene, but we also like like I said, there was so much good music coming out then that we wanted to transcend the scene that we were in, which never really happened, but we always wanted that.
Well, I have some follow-up questions about this. Yeah, how did it go over at the time? I mean, this is back when, like, pre-2000, I think these types of things made people much more upset. Like, how did it go over at the time?
Well, I mean, it wasn't, it was a slow transition. I mean, when Fates came out, we had a pretty positive reaction to it. You know, I remember playing like the song "The Simple Life" in the car for some friends, and they were a little taken aback that we had just decided to write a full-blown acoustic song. You know, coming from the sort of metal-infused years that were Split Lip, it sounded odd, but there was an acceptance, and I think people understood that we were all evolving as musicians. You know, it wasn't until, I mean, the real backlash happened when we put out "The Moon My Saddle," because that, you know, whereas Fates was a departure from Further Love, Moon My Saddle was like tenfold as much of a departure from Fates to the next record. It was, you know, we had made a record that, you know, sounded more like heartland rock, which is kind of what we were into at the time.
And, you know, you said with the name change and the change in sound, you were hoping it would open up new doors and, you know, you could tap into this indie world and playing with different kinds of bands. Did that happen?
It didn't. I don't think we ever had the sort of like infrastructure. I mean, you know, again, I'm dating myself, but like we didn't even like have a website. You know, it's like all of our shows were done through word of mouth and sort of like hard copy address book. You know, we knew the promoters that we knew the friends in other bands. Like, I don't think we knew how to sort of tour. Like, we didn't have an agent, you know, and we were on Doghouse Records. So we would typically do stuff with tangential Doghouse stuff. You know, we would do stuff with, you know, bands on Revelation or Discord, or like we created this world for ourselves, which was a beautiful world, but we didn't know how to branch out beyond its boundaries. It was sort of beyond the knowledge that we had. You know, had we had a manager or something at the time, like perhaps, but you know, we loved the scene too, so we didn't want to completely abandon it. So we just kept doing what we were doing. And perhaps we did it for too long.
So you didn't have like a manager and a booking agent and people like getting you onto these different shows. It sounds like you guys were still operating within the scene and figuring things out yourself.
Yeah, it was super DIY. It wasn't until around the time we recorded "The Moon My Saddle" that, you know, we dabbled with management and that sort of thing. And, you know, I think we went so far to that kind of heartland rock sound on "The Moon My Saddle." I think that was sort of a conscious thing. I think we were just like tired of playing hardcore shows, and we wanted to be on bigger stages and play in bigger clubs. And I think we thought that if we just, you know, I mean, it was the stuff we love. We were listening to the band and Tom Petty and Bob Dylan and Tom Waits, Elvis Costello. Like we lived in Bloomington, Indiana too at the time. So we had definitely been influenced by sort of John Mellencamp's universe. You know, we even recorded the record at John Mellencamp's guitar player studio, Mike Wanchek, and he performs on the record too, as did Mosey, who was Mellencamp's organ player. So we were enamored and we looked up to all those guys. And I think we just took a big swing in that direction, like hoping that it would like take us to the other side of the river. But that was the tough part, because it really didn't. We were still playing the hardcore shows, and we were playing songs like "Try for Thunder" and "Mountain of a Heart," and people really, really didn't like it. I mean, we lost a lot of fans along the way when we did that.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I guess if you're just still operating within that scene, you know, people aren't ready for it, or at least they weren't at the time. And I get it. Like, I remember playing shows in certain bands, and I'm like, man, I feel like this is really good. We just need to get on the right shows. But I never could. I didn't know how. I didn't know about booking agents and PR agents and actually putting in the work to get on those shows. I didn't know about any of that stuff.
No, we were just novices in all of that.
How old were you at that time?
Well, I mean, when "The Moon My Saddle" came out, I was probably wrapping up school, so maybe 19 or 20.
Oh, wow. So you guys are really young still.
I'm the youngest guy in the band. So, yeah, so we were all super early 20s at that point.
And that's usually around the age that, you're moving beyond just hardcore and discovering other music and growing as a musician and person and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we, there was such a, the scene that we're in was just, very stringent and still sort of rebellious and counterculture. So like what we were doing, it had its certain stamp. But yeah, I think eventually everyone kind of went with us, right? I mean,
yeah,
there's anything that's roots tinged. I mean, now bands we used to play with like a Veil, look at how Tim Berry has evolved, or how Chuck Reagan or Lucero came along, Limbeck, who were on Doghouse, like that became part of the scene. And I'm not trying to like put us on some pedestal that we were the first to do something super special. What we were doing wasn't that special. Like we were playing kind of roots rock, but we were kind of one of the first bands in our little universe to sort of cross that line into something that everyone else sort of gravitated towards a little later than we did.
No, absolutely. Like when I think of that whole scene and that whole thing, like you're one of the first bands I can think of within the scene to lock onto that.
Yeah, and I shouldn't say that it was like a conscious thing to like get out. I mean, we did kind of want to leave the scene, but it was, I should emphasize that it was natural too. I mean, it was just I wanted to be a guitar player and I wanted to play guitar solos and David wanted to like really really sing.
Yeah, you guys are just doing what you're doing. It's not like you sat down and planned like, okay, we're going to be a Heartland scene band, and this is what we're going to do next.
I think we just got better. We just got better at our instruments, and it's funny because I listen to Moon My Saddle now, and I'm just like, it still kind of sound. There's still parts of it that it doesn't. People are like, oh, it sounds like a Counting Crows record. I'm like, well, sort of, but it also like, I feel like Charlie is still like playing his drums is heavy as a metal drummer would play them, and Curtis is still playing these intricate sort of Fugazi inspired bass lines. So I think that's what makes the record have the angst that it has, and I think it's why it's held up for a lot of people, which is moving for us.
Yeah, I think about this a lot with scene bands who go lighter. There's still an edge to it. There's still definitely an edge to it. Like if you listen to like a lighter scene band that would be acceptable to a lot of scene people, but then you listen to like a mainstream radio hit, I'm like, oh, okay, I can see the difference here. Because, like when I was a kid, I would show people the Get Up Kids and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I would be like, oh, they're going to love it because it's not screaming, but it would still be like too much for them.
Yeah, absolutely. They wrote, sort of like happier folk songs, but they were still played with this angular grit that was the Get Up Kids.
So the Moon My Saddle is out. You said folks are not so receptive to it in the scene. Where does it all lead? What happens after that?
Well, it dissolves. I think there was some animosity and some frustration amongst a lot of us because, I still love punk, I still love metal, but I also, loved roots rock. I love Wilco. I think all of us were like that to some degree, but there was definitely a lot of push and pull where I feel like everyone wasn't on the same page. And we did Fates. I feel like everyone was playing the exact songs we thought we should be playing for, what we were listening to and our talent level and our scene and all that. And then we got to the Moon My Saddle. It was like, I don't think everyone liked all the songs. Like, we're five guys with five different, we were in college, we're hanging out with different friends, different groups. So it got weird. It definitely got weird. So eventually Curtis and Clay left the band to do other things, and Charlie stayed around for a little bit, and then Charlie wasn't in the band, and then David and I just kind of found new people to play and thought we would just make new songs and keep Chamberlain going, but it never had the same chemistry ever again. And we finally had the irony is we finally had the booking agent that was putting us in these like we're playing colleges and like college towns, and we're playing like in bars where people could drink, and it felt like this is what we wanted to do. But the irony is we were just like the most unhappy that we had ever been. And the band had lost all of its, we were a good band still, but we lost all the edge that we had and the identity that we had. We didn't have an identity anymore. I can say that now. So it dissolved. And then, and from there, we were asked to do this Burning Fight festival, to support, the book Burning Fight that was written about the hardcore scene in the Midwest. And we ended up tacking on a show in Indy and tacking on a show in Louisville. And we just kind of like fell in love with playing music together again. All the chemistry came back. I should say, actually, we got together a year before at South by Southwest because Charlie and Curtis and Dave and I were all playing in different bands, and we did like a little impromptu few songs. But then we did, but Burning Fight was the thing that really ignited it.
That was around 2008, right?
Or 2009. South by Southwest was 2008, then 2009. And then we played shows, and through that, I don't know how word trickled up, but I was sitting at my desk at work, and I got a call from the Gaslight Anthems manager, and she was like, "Hey, Brian really loves you guys and wants to know if you want to support them on their American Slang tour." So we did that in 2010, and then we've been kind of doing things off and on like since then, essentially.
So the band initially ended around 2000?
Yes.
So that's 2000 to 2008, where there's no activity. How did you guys leave it? Were you on good terms? Was everyone okay? Like,
no, we didn't really. None of us spoke to each other. Some of us were raising families. Curtis moved out to LA. Charlie was playing in a bunch of different bands. We really lost touch with each other. Clay was raising a family. I was trying to do music in New York. We all just did different things, and nobody spoke. And I should say that, after 2010, we played Crazy Fest in 2011, and we liked each other again. There was that. But we kind of went back to our lives for for a big gap of time after that as well, until we decided to get back together to do the Moon My Saddle 20th anniversary tour.
So after the initial end of the band, you said you're playing in New York City?
Yeah, I moved out here. I put out my own record, the Adam Dove record, and I was trying to do that initially. And then I formed a band called Dear Lions with some friends. And, nothing really got off the ground. But, I played with various people and started working in commercial music a little bit, and not that exciting of a story on my end.
Well, how did you feel during that time? Did you look fondly back on the Chamberlain days? Did you wish you guys had continued or could continue? Where were you at the time before you guys got back together?
I did. I mean, I'll say this. I know that I'm probably the reason that we're still doing stuff today. I'm always the guy that pushes it to happen. And I just, my personality is one that can't let go of things easily. And I do realize that we had something special, and every time we get together, it's still something special, and which takes me to in 2018, we had the best time on the Moon My Saddle tour. And then we decided we haven't been to Europe in 20 years either. Fuck it. Let's go to Europe. And then we did a week overseas, and, 20 years later, sold out our show in Berlin, and it was all, just magic stuff. And I know what it's like, to moving to New York and trying to do my own thing and playing shows and having, 6 people and the bartender watching you play. So I don't take it for granted. Even now, it's not like we bring hundreds and hundreds of people into our shows, but people show up and sing our songs, and that's something that I don't take for granted.
Absolutely. Yeah. I discovered the band, I think around 2004, when I got heavily into post-hardcore and that whole scene. And I discovered the band through Fate's Got a Driver. And I didn't know the history of the band, or that you used to be Split Lip, or that there was, some name change and all this stuff that other people have mentioned. But to me, it was just great music. I really dig it.
Well, thank you.
And part of the reason that we're talking today is because it's the 25th anniversary of Fate's Got a Driver. Did you ever imagine back in 1995 when making that record that you'd be here today still talking about it?
Absolutely not. Well, I should clarify that. Yeah, I guess I thought I'd probably be doing something different. Yeah, I'll stick with the original. Yes, absolutely not. I kind of thought that like this was like something we were doing as kids that would just evolve into something bigger, and we had a tendency to sort of like trash the old songs. Like we'd write songs and then not want to play them ever again. We're still kind of like that, but yeah, I mean, there was a while I couldn't even listen to Fates because the tempos were all over the place, and it just felt sort of angsty and full of like novice adolescence. Like I just couldn't listen to it. And then something happened over time where it's just like I started to like it. It started to grow back on me again. And then we play the songs live now with our current maturity. We play the songs in tempo, and I recognize some of the songs is pretty good, but I'm not really answering your question. I guess the short answer is no. I thought that it was just, a couple years removed from Faith. I just thought it was just kids banging on their instruments. Like, why would anybody want to listen to it?
I mean, you must have been, 16, 17 when that was being recorded?
I was maybe 18, I think.
I mean, that's pretty sophisticated music for an 18-year-old, I gotta say.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I remember writing a lot of in the dorms when I was like a freshman in college. So yeah, I think I was like 18.
Take us back to some of that time. I mean, like recording the record, right? You already had it out under Split Lip, but we decided to go back and change the name. Did they re-record the vocals, or did you re-record the music? Like, what did you change?
I think what it was is we went on tour and played a lot of those songs the summer after we recorded it, and we realized like, man, we are playing these songs better than they are on the record now. That we're like growing up fast at that age, and David is singing them way better than he had done on his first attempt. So we're like, let's go back and redo the vocals. Let's just redo this instead of like re-recording the record. We just thought like we could fix the vocals and maybe remix it and make it better. And really, the split lip version and the Chamberlain version are not a whole lot different to my ears. People will argue with me on this, but they're not that much different.
Yeah, I've on forums and stuff, I've heard older guys be like, "Oh, they changed the name and oh, they changed this," but I wasn't around. I wasn't privy to any of that. All I know is that I discovered this awesome record, "Fate's Got a Driver" by Chamberlain, and that I've liked it ever since. And I just have to throw it in. I think "Simple Life" is one of the best songs ever. There you go.
Thank you.
Yes, I still listen to that one to this day.
Well, I appreciate that you are not one of those old guys that like has all the, angry hardcore baggage. Yeah.
Yeah.
I envy you to just kind of listen to it with fresh ears without all that ridiculous knowledge.
Yeah. I think it sounds like that's some of what happened to the band. Like it sounds like maybe the world wasn't ready or the time wasn't right or all that stuff. But then slightly younger people like myself just discover this and they're like, hey, this is great music. And it sounds like the rest of the world caught up. I mean, you're out on tour with the Gaslight Anthem. Certainly there's more of a Americana thing happening within the realm of punk music. And now it's your time.
Yeah. And it's great for you to say that. I mean, yeah, we definitely picked up fans on that Gaslight Anthem tour. And, we made a record in 2020 called Red Weather. And I feel like it's like the next evolution. It's like, I feel like we're just making the music that we want to make now and people like it. And it doesn't have that sort of cloudiness to it. Like, where does it belong? It doesn't matter where things belong anymore. Things belong everywhere. There's just, again, we didn't have all the mediums. We didn't have streaming and social media and all the stuff that's available to us now. That allows music in any form to exist everywhere. It's not beholden to any scene.
Exactly. I think after the year 2000, around there, a lot of the BS stopped of like, oh, this band does this and they can't do that. And, oh, they signed to this label. Like it seems like that became much less of a thing. So it's probably great now that you can just be a band and record the music you want to record and put it out there and people like it. Or they don't, and if they don't, well, whatever.
Yeah, and I don't know where all that tribalism came from. It's sort of like, it's like in the hip hop scene, growing up, there was like, the East Coast, West Coast, like, riff. Like, I don't think that really exists anymore in the hip hop world either. I mean, it just feels ridiculous.
Yeah, it seems like it doesn't now.
Yeah.
So how does the band decide they're going to play again? I mean, you guys weren't really talking, it sounds like. How did the conversation start? How does it all come together? And now this is back in 2008 for the South by Southwest gig and the Burning Fight gig.
Oh, I mean, the South by Southwest thing was just a goof. Like, we were all there, and I kind of emailed all the guys, and I was like, let's just try to do something with no rehearsal. Like, there's this Doghouse showcase. Like, let's just show up and play. And we did, and it was a blast, and we had so much fun. But, you know what it was with the Burning Fight thing? It was just like, Brian, who wrote the book, I'm not going to say we did it for money, but he basically, offered us enough money to cover our flights to get there. And it just felt like, and then the show was at the Metro. We had never played the Metro in Chicago. And it felt like this Life Gives You Lemons moment where it was just like, we can't turn this down. Like, playing for like a huge crowd at the Metro. Like, it was the same reason we went on the Gaslight tour. I was like, we're playing the Wiltern and First Avenue and all these clubs I'd always dreamed of playing. So it felt like that. I mean, that was really the impetus. And then, like I said, we just tacked on some other shows in our hometown, of course, and in Louisville, our second hometown. But I don't think it was without trepidation from some of the members. I don't remember exactly. I'm sure I had to do some cajoling with David. I'm sure I had to talk David into it. I probably had to talk Curtis into it too, because the other thing was we weren't like best friends then either. And I think that experience made us really good friends again, because we just got back in the room and everyone had the same idiosyncrasies, the same humor came back. And then musically, just like, it was seamless. We just started playing the songs, and they just felt like they always have, and I guess that comes from growing up and being in the van with those guys and being in the practice space with them for, all of our formative years together. We're definitely close to like related brothers in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, you spend so much time together and growing up together. You have to be.
Yes. I mean, and there are still text chains that, go on weekly with the same kind of humor and jokes and, and silliness. And yeah, I hope it stays that way.
Did you see renewed interest in the band before you played those shows and got out there again? I mean, the internet is around and blogs and social media and all this stuff is happening, and younger people like me are discovering the band. I mean, were you privy to any of that?
Not really. I actually was, I think one of the we were so nervous to play those shows because we're like, oh my God, we haven't done this in years. Like, does anyone, give a shit anymore? But then, I should say after that, actually before the Gaslight, I left out another important show. We actually played at the Bowery Ballroom and almost sold it out. And that's when I kind of knew, like, oh my God, like we still have like this staying power. That was in, that was also at the end of 2009. We played with Walter Schreifels and our friends in Atlantic Pacific.
I wish I was here for that show, but I didn't live here at the time. Wow.
Yeah, and then we billed ourselves as Split Lip / Chamberlain for that show too, just because we wanted to get everybody to come, We didn't care. It was like, it felt like a reunion of old friends, and it was.
Yeah.
But that show was just cathartic for me, at least personally. I can't speak for the other guys, but it was like my favorite show I've ever played. I didn't talk about it. Just seeing all those faces, singing back at us in New York City. We used to play like the Acme Underground or, Coney Island or whatever to, nobody.
That's got to be the best feeling, because back when you're actually doing it, you're not playing to as many people, or the scene you're involved with doesn't quite understand what you're doing. And then to be in your home city in a full house, I would have been a wreck. And I mean a wreck in a good way.
Yeah, it was super emotional.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think we kind of just did it at the right time, to kind of sustain us for a bit. But so to answer your question, like, did I know, that maybe there's still some interest? It took probably that show for me to realize that, like, oh, there is still interest, and we can still play, and no band has to break up anymore. Like, you can just do it when you want to do it. You don't have to make it your like, and it got easier too. Like when, we have other lives and there's not, everything isn't riding on it. I mean, it's like we made a new record in 2020. It was so great being in the studio because we're like, someone has an idea and I don't like your idea. Okay, let's try a different idea. Like, I'll still go back home to my family. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Like we just are trying to make the best music we can. And it sucks. You have to wait that long in life to get to that realization. But, all things in their time.
Exactly. I'm 40 years old now, and I'm only starting to handle things in a more mature fashion. So when I was younger, forget about it. If someone didn't like my idea or wanted to change something, I would just quit the band or, I don't know, quit the band.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the things that I would get upset about, someone didn't like the tone on a certain guitar part or something, like I definitely would storm out of the room. Absurd the convictions you have when you're super young.
So talk about recording your 2020 record, Red Weather. I mean, this is the first time we're recording again in a long time. How was the process? We don't have this history to deal with anymore and name changes and a scene that wants us to be one thing, but we're trying to do another thing. We can just be ourselves and be adults and be friends and record this thing. Yes?
Yeah, it was a big experiment. I mean, it's our friend Carl Bramall from the band My Morning Jacket, who's we've known since we were kids. He's got a little studio at his place in Nashville, and he had a little live room he wanted to do the main tracks in. And it started with, hey, we're going to Europe. We might want to do like a 7-inch or single before our European tour. And Carl just said, and we were thinking about making a record. And Carl's like, why don't you guys just come to Nashville? We'll do a couple songs. If it's working, if it feels right, and we have a good time, then let's make a record. And so we went down, no expectations, did have a great time. We wrote Some Other Sky and put it, we actually recorded the song Red Weather as well while we were down there in that first run. And we did an acoustic version of Street Singer from Fate's Got a Driver. And I felt great when we were done with it. I felt like, man, like there's just so much more in us. That was like, no one knew the songs coming down there. We just kind of like hashed it out in the studio and came out with something good. So like we can surely put together like another 8 songs and make a record. So we went down and Carl was incredible. He's one of my like favorite musicians and writers that I know. And he just helped us craft this thing and make it sound like us. And I think we did a really good job too of just, instead of fighting like we did with The Moon My Saddle when everyone had different influences, like sure, we all listen to a lot of different things now after all of these years. But I think all of us put our stamp on it, We figured out a way to just make songs that we all liked, and we compromised, I mean, everyone has different favorite songs because nobody cared. If somebody didn't like an idea, somebody didn't like a drum part or a guitar part or a bass line or a vocal lyric, we would just change it or try something else, and it certainly makes me want to do it again because, the secret is we just didn't, I came down with a handful of ideas and David and I wrote a little bit in advance, but really not much. It was basically some chord progressions and some scribbled down lyrics.
That sounds so scary to me. Like I would need all the songs fully and completely done before I went down there. Like how much were you working on and coming up with in the studio?
A lot. I mean,
wow.
We kind of decided we would do like 2 or 3 songs a day and whatever happened would happen. And I think it's what gives the record its charm. And then there's Calling All Cars, which is probably the most popular song from the record. We actually wrote it after we had finished in the studio. I was like, man, it needs one more up-tempo song. I sort of sent, I have a little home studio and I sent the guys a little drum track and a guitar part. And Dave was like, this is incredible. Like we have to do this song. So after the session, Charlie went back to Carl's, did the drums, and David went down and sang it when he did some of the overdubs for the lead vocals. So that was interesting, kind of like writing a song remotely too, which also opened our eyes to a lot of stuff. We're like, whoa, like we can do this remotely. And then, we ended up doing this Fugazi cover in 2021, and we did a Christmas song for fun. We did a Pogues cover. Everyone's got a little setup now. So if we ever do decide to write another record, it'll be a lot of fun because we can sort of just write it this way. Maybe when we, descend on Nashville or something again, we'll actually know what the hell we're doing.
No, that's excellent. Yeah. I need to get into that remote recording thing. I've been meaning to do that for years now, but it'll happen when it happens.
No, it happened. Just dude, you already have you're talking on a microphone. Like that's all you need.
I know. Yeah. I'm making it more complicated than I need to, I think. I'm like, oh, I got to get the interface and this and that and plugins. But no, I could probably do it right now with the equipment that I have. It just wouldn't be as sophisticated.
You could mic an acoustic guitar. You could send me a track, and I could put something on top of it and send it back to you, and then you could play the game of telephone with the next person who's going to participate on it. That's the frightening thing, but it's also about how easy it is to do. But it's also the wonderful thing about making music in this decade.
You're inspiring me, Adam, both in making me realize that I can do this already, and just when you said like you're performing with the band, and if someone's like, oh, I don't like that part, you just change it. I need to learn some of that, because if I'm playing with people and like they make a face when I'm playing something, I'm like, what you don't like it? Come up with something better then.
Yeah, I mean that doesn't go away completely, but the little like whatever dude on my shoulder, I had him there the whole session, just being like, it doesn't matter. You're making a record with your best friends. Nothing matters. You're here, So yeah, that's kind of how I looked at it, and I think every other guy in the band felt the same way, which was just really nice to hear after we were done.
It's got to be nice that everybody is friendly now, right? I mean, you can tour together, you can perform together. You wrote a new record together, because there were many years where you weren't talking to each other.
Yeah, those are many bitter years. But I think everyone's lives have turned out great, and I think everyone's sort of just grateful for the experiences, and grateful for anything that's yet to come.
So what is to come, Adam? What's coming up? What can we look forward to?
I can't say for sure what's happening. I mean, I have sent some demos out to the guys, because I'm a crazy person who doesn't stop working on music. And so, maybe that'll go somewhere. Some other things that I want to do, like we have some B-sides from the Red Weather sessions that we've been toying with putting out. There's some releases we want to do, there's some records that are out of print. We did some stuff in between the Move My Saddle and Fates that never really got a fair shake. And then it's exhausting to think about, but I don't like it that some of our records are out of print too, that, the Move My Saddle is just like Top Shelf did a reissue of it, but it's completely out of print. I'd like to maybe do a special edition of that one day too. So lots of projects, lots of Chamberlain things that might happen. I would love to go. We had such a great time in Europe. I'd love to go back. We've never been to Australia. We've never been to Brazil. Like, there's definitely like things that may or may not happen. Anything that I just talked about, like none of it might happen, or all of it could happen. I really don't know. We played some shows in April, so that's miraculous to me. I feel like we do these things sort of piecemeal. It's like, all right, we played some shows. Everybody go back to their lives. Let's talk in a few weeks and figure out what we might do next. And that's kind of how we approach things.
Yeah. So there's no specific plans, but it sounds like there's plenty of potential, like record reissues that you're talking about, right? Is Exit 263 potentially one of those?
Well, Exit 263 is weird, because that was that weird period where like, we had different band members, and it's not a record. It's a collection of demos that our management at the time put out as a record.
Yeah.
When we weren't talking to each other, that came out kind of like unbeknownst to us. It's weird. I'm glad a lot of people like those songs, and a lot of those songs I think had potential. I mean, when I hear it, I'm like, oh my God, like someone needs to re-record these fully realized ideas, because they're all like half-baked demos, recorded in. I recorded a lot of those songs on like a old digital 8-track recorder in our practice space. Like it wasn't meant to be a record, but it's cool. I mean, people gravitate towards it. People like it. Like, who am I to say that it's good or it's not good? It's all objective, but it's just, I don't consider it a Chamberlain record.
So wait, management put it out without you guys knowing?
I think we knew, but we just didn't care. That's how much we had folded in the tent at that point. Yeah.
Oh, so they're like, we're going to put this out, but you're almost don't care enough to even fight it.
Exactly.
Well, it must have been good. You said you played some shows in April. It must have been good to play after the long pandemic hiatus.
Well, we played 2 shows, and we played Chicago and Indianapolis in 2021, sort of like right as like Delta was hitting. And that was a little weird. And then there was a huge surge happening in April, COVID surge. And it was just like, and now, now we're in another surge. I hate to talk about COVID, but everything just doesn't feel like I thought it was going to feel. It still just feels like a little strained for people. I still know people that don't go to shows, that don't want to come out, but the turnouts were good and the shows are good and we played great. And we had, most importantly, we had like a ton of fun. And it did feel good to be together and playing these songs from like Red Weather that like we never got a chance to play live.
Right.
So it's cool that we got to play them.
No, that's great. So what do you do when you're not doing Chamberlain?
I do a lot of music supervision, and I primarily, in addition to that, do a lot of film score stuff and some commercial music work.
That's right. You do music composition for film and TV. Talk about some of that. What do you do? What do you do it for? This is very interesting.
Well, I started working at a commercial music house in, the owner of the company would not like me calling it a commercial music house. But it was a company called Man-Made Music. They're now called Made Music Studio, and kind of learned the studio better than I'd ever known it there. And through that, I started working on a film called Medora, which is a documentary about basketball, a high school basketball team in Indiana. And that was kind of like my first real like film that I worked on. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I just met like more directors. I worked on a film called 9 Man, which is a PBS film. And I got to do a 30 for 30 for ESPN called Kid Danny. With that same director, I worked on a feature which you can now find on Netflix called Night School. Did a couple of things for Stars, movie called Rape of Reese Taylor. I don't know. I don't want to give you my whole elevator pitch, but basically what I do, and I'm working on something for Discovery right now. So I've been very lucky and very blessed to like have all these cool projects and cool films to work on. But I kind of just fell backwards into it. Like I said, I just took a job at a commercial music studio and just started thumbing my way into that industry and just figuring out a way to do something with music. I can't, I always have the itch to write stuff. So if I can't play in a band, I got to write for something. And music for film is just, it's a total joy. It's like, you're telling the same story that you would with lyrics in a lot of ways. Yeah,
it's got to be so great. I do little video stuff and I'll match up video with existing music and all that kind of thing. But to actually create the music for the thing you're watching, it's got to be unbelievable.
Yeah, if you're working with the right director, it is. If it's not too frustrating, it is. No, I mean, I've been very proud of a lot of the things that I've got to work on.
What's it like if you're not working with the right director?
I got to choose my words carefully. I don't want to. Revisions are always just annoying. If you really, if you put a piece of music to picture and you're like, wow, this is expressing the exact emotional takeaway that I was hoping it would. It's, it's hitting with every cut. It's exactly what I want. And then, the director tells you it's all wrong and you've stayed up all night working on it. It's frustrating.
Yeah. No, I get it. I've made videos before and I'm like, this is perfect. It's hitting me right in the heartstrings. And someone will be like, take out this part. And I'm like, but that's the part, but it's like the director chooses. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah, the director chooses, and you have to surrender to that. You have to put on your red weather hat where it's like, it doesn't matter. You got the gig. It's all going to be good. We're going to try different ideas and it's going to come out great. And it always does come out great. But some of that, ego and frustration from the early Split Lip or Chamberlain days definitely creeps back in those moments.
No, I get it. That's something I have to quell constantly. It's a constant battle. And what kind of instruments are you using for the film production? What are you playing, composing?
You would think I prefer to do guitar stuff. I prefer to do like kind of hybrid orchestral ambient guitar stuff. But that's like almost never the call. So I've kind of just taught myself how to be a better keyboard player, and I program a lot of stuff. If I need a string section, like I play it very slowly, few notes at a time until I have what I need.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I would say what I do is sort of like hybrid orchestral. There's always like orchestral, small chamber sized sort of modern classical stuff that are in a lot of the films I work on, with other modern elements, whether it's samples I find, whether it's guitar parts that I play, that sort of thing. I wish I could talk about this film I'm working on now, but I've signed the NDA. I can't talk about it. But yeah, if you follow me on social media, you'll hear about it eventually. No, I mean, and then I'm getting a whole big thing about this. I'm directing my first documentary as well. I had a cousin who played in a band called the Barkays, and he I never knew him. He died in the plane crash with Otis Redding in 1967. So I'm telling his story and the story of the original Barkays through his lens. And yeah, I've been interviewing a lot of people for it and almost done shooting. So hopefully I can get to the post-production phase and find a suitor for it and all that. So that's my other big project I'm working on outside of this. And maybe there'll be a Chamberlain release and some new music soon. We shall see.
Excellent. So there's tons going on, and that's awesome.
Yes, like I said, I'm very lucky. There is a lot going on.
Yeah, because I've had days and years where there's absolutely nothing going on. And in my life, whenever things get difficult, I just think about those times. And I'm like, you know what? I'm happy. Even if I'm unhappy right now, I'm happy because there's just constantly things to do, awesome things to do, creating things, putting things out there, playing music, all that stuff. And I hope it continues for a long time.
The life of a freelancer is terrifying. There's definitely lulls where I just like question everything, question all of my choices. And there's times where I'm completely not busy, and there's times where I'm out of my head. And each have their challenges, but each can be awesome in their own way too.
Well, Adam, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. It's mind-blowing to me. I never would have imagined back as a young 24-year-old listening to Chamberlain for the first time that I'd be here all these years later talking to you. And I'm glad that I get to help you celebrate this record in the small way that I can. And look, I appreciate what you and the band do, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been fun to talk. It's been a long chat, so it means we were having a good time.
Indeed. There you have it, folks. Adam Rubenstein. That was an excellent conversation. I'm very happy that I got to speak with Adam and help the band celebrate 25 years of Fate's Got a Driver. I had heard stories about Chamberlain and, how they used to be Split Lip and then how they switched to Chamberlain, but I didn't know the full story. I didn't know that they had re-recorded part of the album, and I didn't know that they were the only band to ever do something like that before, as Adam pointed out. So it was great to hear about that and what they're doing now. And my favorite part of the interview is, Adam talked about this, just how things didn't exactly work out back in the day because, maybe the name was holding them back and they were still playing shows within the scene that expected them to be one thing, but they were trying something different. The world wasn't quite ready for what they were trying to do. And then all this time goes by and the rest of the world catches up. Brian from the Gaslight Anthem loves them and wants to bring them out on tour, and they're kind of having this second life, and I love that. I love that they're talking again, that they're friends again, that they're performing again, and that it sounds like they're writing again too. So very, very happy to talk to Adam.
Yeah, it was awesome. Actually, 1995 was, when Fate's Got a Driver came out, and that was the year I started getting into punk and hardcore. And so that this interview was really specifically poignant to me. In addition, I was actually born in Louisville and have spent time going there my whole life. And I love that town. And while they're not from Louisville specifically, they're Louisville adjacent. And I found that really interesting. And it just led me to go back to thinking about great bands like Endpoint and Falling Forward And it really got me thinking about that time period and just looking at these bands. I kind of think 1995 was the pivotal year, because you can look at the bands that were before 95 in that scene, and they really kind of were more like DC, like earlier emo stuff. And Adam was mentioning that they did tours with Samuel and Ashes, and those are DC bands. And then it's just 95 is when the Get Up Kids and Promise Ring started, and Braid sort of, and it was just after that when you have Split Lip changing their name to Chamberlain, re-releasing this record, which is kind of surprising, the same record with a new name, that they were so motivated to do that. And then you look after that happened, the whole scene, the music kind of changed. You have Elliot, and Kendall became the Kendalls. Piebald kind of changed their sound from being roll around the floor, screamy, to Piebald. And I don't know, it was just, Metro Shifter. I don't know. It was just fascinating.
Yeah, it's so interesting, like the shifts in music and the scene and bands trying different things. And sometimes people are receptive to it and sometimes they aren't. Like in my time, Cave-In is the first band that comes to mind of a band who tried something different, and a lot of people loved what they were doing differently and some people didn't. And, listening to you now, Seth, it's like the same thing was happening years earlier with all these other bands.
Well, at the time, I wasn't super into Fate's Got a Driver, and upon revisiting it, I still like Split Lip more personally. But the strange thing to me was that at that time it was like 95 or 96. There was a whole article about emo that came out. I think it was in Guitar World, and it was titled Emo Rock, and it was talking about Jimmy Eat World and Get Up Kids and Promise Ring and stuff like that. And I feel like there's this division before that. I mean, it sounds so semantic, but it's like emo core before, it was more connected to hardcore. And then after, it was like emo rock, and it's really reflected in the music. And the strange thing to me was that you hear in the interview, Adam's talking about how their follow-up album, The Moon, My Saddle, wasn't really that well received because it was sort of almost even alt country. I mean, that record is like 10 years too early. You have like Chuck Reagan doing it about 10 years later, and they were innovators both as Split Lip, as Chamberlain, both of those records. Everything is just constant innovation, and whether the scene was ready to accept it or not, it shows a lot for their artistry.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they were definitely one of, if not the first bands in the scene on that alt country kind of tip. And you know what? Adam mentioned in the interview, like, he's like, I don't think the record sounded really that different from Split Lip to Chamberlain, Fate's Got a Driver. And I've gone back to YouTube and done a comparison of some of those songs, and I agree with him. In fact, I think the Chamberlain songs sound better. But hey, listen, it's up to the listener.
Yeah, I mean, whether you think they're better or one or the other, I personally think the songs sound quite different. But that's there's nothing wrong with that at all. There's some great songs on all of their records, and a lot of great songs. But it was interesting revisiting that time when the scene, there was a lot of criticism of bands that came out of the scene, out of the hardcore scene, out of the punk scene, that started sounding a bit more mainstream. He made some sort of comment that some of the criticisms that they received were that it sounded like a Counting Crows record. I thought that was kind of funny. Because that would have been one of the criticisms that I would have made of a band like that, because I was at that time quite critical.
Yeah, it's funny to hear that now, because when I got into hardcore, I guess around the year 2000, the second Counting Crows record, that was like a record that every hardcore kid liked. Like every hardcore kid would mention that record.
Maybe in Philly. I don't know about Boston.
All right, I shouldn't say every. Maybe like 5 people that I knew, but that was everyone to me.
Yeah, no. I mean, it was interesting because he also talked about, one of the issues when Fate's Got a Driver came out. He described it as old guys with angry hardcore baggage. It's just so fascinating to me because even thinking about when Split Lip formed, what else was going on in the scene, 1990, 91, you have a dramatic change in the hardcore scene around that time with bands like Youth of Today breaking up, turning into Shelter. You've got Chain of Strength type of bands. You've got Inside Out. You have a lot of hardcore bands trying to incorporate new elements and kind of add some metallic elements and kind of get away from the punk. And so you could just see the mixing and the milieu of what's going on in the hardcore scene from listening to Split Lip, because they started in 1990 and basically ended in 95. It's this amazing time period that I don't know, we don't talk about that much.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great speaking to you. And folks, if you're listening to this and you somehow haven't heard Chamberlain yet, listen to Fate's Got a Driver, of course, because it's the 25-year anniversary. But I really like the new record, too. Red Weather. Chamberlain is still out there. They're still doing it. They're still releasing music. They're still recording. So check them out. All right, Seth. So let's talk about how we are doing. And I'm going to start with you, Seth, because people have heard from me enough. Now, first, let's get to know you. Talk about your label, Negative Progression Records.
Well, Negative Progression Records started in 1996 and continued until 2014. And I just started it up again a couple months ago. I was putting out stuff back in the day, mostly pop punk and emo, and this sort of intersection of those two genres. My earliest success, I would say, the band that most people know is a band called Counterfeit. They were from San Diego. Really, really incredible band, emo band. They toured a lot. They were incredibly energetic, and one of those bands that the people that knew about them loved them, and just don't believe they got enough attention. So for everyone who's listening to this, if you want to check out one band on Negative Progression Records, Counterfeit would be a great starter.
Yeah, I remember seeing the June Spirit back in the day too. I really liked them.
Yeah. Around that time, I put out the June Spirit. They were from New Jersey. They got a lot of attention, and they were great. I put out a band called Over It, who was a kind of a fast pop punk band from Virginia. I put out their first 3 records, and they moved to California and eventually got signed to a major label. I also put out a band called The Progress, which was an incredible band.
That's Evan from Into It Over It's band, right?
Yes.
He was talking about that band when he was on this show.
Yeah. I love that record. It's one of my favorite records I've ever put out. I've put out, a little bit later, I started putting out some heavier music because I've always been involved in the hardcore scene. But I really didn't want to put out hardcore stuff because I wanted to have sort of an identity with my label. But as other labels, larger labels like Equal Vision and Epitaph and Victory started mixing genres, I figured, why not Negative Progression? So I put out some like heavier music, and those records are all really good. I would recommend everyone check them out. I have set up some genre specific playlists on Spotify. So if you like pop punk stuff, you can listen to that. If you like emo, listen to that. Heavy music, listen to that.
You have everything up on Bandcamp as well, right?
Yes. It's all up on Bandcamp.
Yeah, so go check it out, folks. And Seth, what made you want to start up the label again?
Well, so I'm an attorney by profession, and I run my own law practice. I do criminal defense work, and before that, I was a prosecutor. And so I put out my last release in 2014, and that's kind of when I decided that, so many years, 17, 18 years of working hard, trying to promote bands, I just needed to shift a little bit at that point, and I started focusing on the law and started really emphasizing my legal career. But over the years, I started really missing music and just being involved in music. And occasionally bands would get in touch with me, bands that maybe I was friends with that were on other labels that were in new bands, or bands that used to be on Negative Progression that were in new bands. And they approached me regularly. But the last year or two, there have been a lot of like podcasts like yours and great labels like Iodine. Casey over there is a friend of mine, and just starting up again, putting out a lot of great bands, re-releasing things, and it just got me all excited. So I started an Instagram, and I got a lot of really positive feedback, more than I was even expecting, to be perfectly honest. And it just, I was flattered. I was so flattered, and I decided to, just for fun, put out a couple 7-inches, and that's where we're going with it. We're taking it easy. I'm not trying to make it my profession, but trying to, be involved, and signed a great band from Long Island called Gone Stereo. They sound kind of like Face to Face, and they're really, really awesome. There's a single out now, and I would recommend, if you like pop punk California style, you would definitely like this. And I just signed a band called Grayed Out, and they're from California. And actually, it's 4 of the 5 members of This Time Next Year, which was a great band on Equal Vision.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. Your story sounds kind of like mine too. In 2013, I started the career that I'm in now, and I was just super busy all the time, and I just didn't really have time for anything. And I never stopped listening to music or going to shows, but it certainly went on the back burner for a bit. And in 2017, things changed, and I was on Instagram more, and I discovered all these different scene sites and all these things, and the podcast sprung out of that. I just really reconnected with everything in a deep way that I haven't since I was young. So, I'm glad that I'm doing this. And Seth, I'm glad that you're doing the label again. It sounds like there's a lot of excellent stuff coming up.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. And I think right now there's some nostalgia happening. I don't know if it happens to be because we're of a certain age or whatnot, but it's great that a lot of bands are getting back together and touring, and maybe it's post-COVID, we all want to go, get rid of some energy and go to shows. And I think that's awesome. I'm often asked if I'm going to re-release old records on vinyl. My emphasis has always been finding new bands, finding young bands, putting out new stuff. Like I once read an interview with Ian MacKaye, and he said, every new band is more important than every old band, because those old bands, they already created their art, and the new bands, they have new art to create. So that, I think that's so cool. I've always been a big Discord Records fan.
I love that. Yes, same here. I like to acknowledge the past and focus on the future. There is much more to accomplish, right?
Yeah. Let's hope. I mean, that would be depressing if it wasn't true.
So how are you doing, Seth? I mean, you personally, what's your story? You got family? What do you got going on?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, actually. I about 8 years ago, I moved back to Orlando, Florida, where I grew up. And previously I lived in Boston and San Francisco and Brooklyn. So I have a lot of friends from the scene and otherwise in those places. And so I moved back to where my family lives, and started working as a prosecutor. Then I ended up starting my own law firm, like I said before, and that's going well. I really like criminal law because I feel like I'm really making an impact in people's lives on both sides, actually. On the side of the prosecution, you get to help make the community safer and work hard to make sure justice is done. And on the defense side, you have to, make sure that you help an individual person and ensure that they're taken care of and that the Constitution is upheld. On top of that, I recently got married a little more than a year ago, so that's wonderful. And
excellent.
Yeah, that's the main thing. I'm enjoying the sunshine and trying to do a lot of traveling by car. I'm not really getting back into the flying thing just yet, but there's a lot of great places to go visit in the Southeast, and been trying to do that.
Yeah, that sounds great. I've had to fly a couple times since this whole New World thing kicked off, but it's not so bad. I just leave the mask on the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all learning how to reconnect with each other in different ways and new ways. And I mean, to a certain extent, there's been gasoline added to the fire of technology. I mean, you and I aren't in the same place. You're in New York and I'm in Florida, and we're able to do this. And that's pretty awesome. And I mean, geez, just being able to normalize Zoom and video is amazing, technologically amazing. I mean, I think back to, I was listening to a podcast with, I can't remember who it was, some older band, and they were talking about going on tour and having to use dialers to call for the next show or book. And I mean, I was booking tours in the 90s as well, and I booked. I was a local promoter as well, and I just think about the technology. It's fascinating, and that's one of the challenges of running a label now, is that back then the hard part was a band wanted to get their music heard, so it had to be a situation where you help them get their record into stores. But now anyone can just record at home and put their stuff up on Spotify. So now the difficulty for a label is highlighting, finding this needle in the haystack and shining a spotlight on them and highlighting them and getting them attention. That's challenging.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I hear you on the technology thing. My company still wasn't using Teams or video or anything like that. We were still just on the phone doing proposals and all this kind of stuff. And that seems unbelievable to me. Like up until 2020, that's the way it was.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of businesses now are thinking that because COVID is quote unquote over, they want to go back to doing things the way that they were doing them before, and half of the workforce is opposed to that. So we're still in for some changes, but I hope everyone. I know this is a time where people have been focused on the negative things going on, and there's plenty of negative things going on. I'm not going to dismiss it, but I hope people spend a little bit of time and energy thinking about the accomplishments, the good things that have happened. And there have been good things that have happened over the last few years. Absolutely.
I mean, the New Scene podcast came as a result of the pandemic. And what could be better than that?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Talking to someone who's a major Ink and Dagger fan is so exciting for me.
That's it. Yeah, folks, before we hit record, we were talking about Ink and Dagger and how Seth saw them in Boston and our mutual love of the band. And that's always going to be a talking point for me. That will never change.
Yeah. I like talking about different scenes and, Philly and Boston and New York, because I was in Boston from 96 to 2000. And I think that was a very special time in that scene there.
Oh, God. Yeah. You must have seen it all.
Well, it was awesome. It was fun. I met a lot of great friends.
That's great. Well, folks, we're almost out of time, but listen, before I go, I want to remind you that we're going to be here. We're back Monday with another all-star guest. We've got amazing guests coming up. We have more amazing guest co-hosts coming up. There's going to be no shortage. There's going to be no shortage of wonderful things coming from the New Scene. And folks, if you're on Twitch, follow me and turn on notifications. I'm going to be doing a lot more live streams in July and August, so check it out. We want to thank Adam Rubenstein for coming on the show. We want to wish Chamberlain a happy 25 years of Fate's Got a Driver. And I want to thank Seth Hyman from Negative Progression Records for joining me in the co-host chair. Seth, thank you so much for joining me on the show. And that's it. We're back Monday. So thanks everybody for listening. And until next time.